John Rawls wrote this book, A Theory of Justice, in 1971, and this raised a storm of commentary and criticism, and in response to that criticism, Rawls made certain clarifications in an article titled Justice as Fairness, Political and Not Metaphysical. Political and not metaphysical. By that he meant the principles are applicable only in political context and not in the context of totality of life, not total life, but only in the context of political. But what did he mean by this? And what is his view on liberalism itself? So we are going to examine that. His view of liberalism is very insightful. It is something like this. Take, for example, the value of equality. How can we say man is equal? How can we say man is equal to woman? So what does it mean by equality as an ideal in democracy? These questions are often raised in the context of democracy. For example, certain things are granted as rights, right to life. Who granted this right? So things like this. And to answer questions like this, one can think of an analogy. Take, for example, cinema theatre. Hall owner is selling first class at 200 rupees, second class at 100 rupees, and third class at 50 rupees. And he says, whoever pays will be given the ticket. So if somebody pays 200, he will get first class. If he pays 100, he will get second class, like this. Whoever, regardless of sex, caste, religion, or academic qualification. Regardless of these things, he will be provided a particular accommodation in the cinema theatre. So, theatre owner says he is following the principle of equality. The equality principle he is following is only in terms of allocation of tickets. He is not making a comment on whether people are actually equal or not. He is not saying a 10th class qualified person or 10th class student is equal to a postgraduate. Hall owner is not making any statement like this. He is only saying whoever pays 200 rupees, he will get first class. That's all. There is no comment, there is no judgment on who is better educated. The equality that hall owner follows is restricted to only allocation of tickets. This has nothing to do with his belief on whether the humans are equal or not. Whether a 10th class passed is equal to a postgraduate student, postgraduate qualified person. So, equality in the context of ticket distribution in the cinema halls. And Rawls has a similar concern of the political. Man has many things, he is total. There are many aspects. He has religious beliefs, he has philosophical ideas, okay. He has certain conceptions of goodness, okay. Some are better individuals. So man as a total is this. But man as a political and as a citizen is limited. And Rawls says his laws of justice are only in the context of the political and not total. So, a theory of justice is for citizens only, not for human beings on the whole. It is for citizens only, not for man on the whole. So this is what Rawls wants to say. So in this context, he is providing various clarifications on what those principles are. Let us look at them. Number one, first he says his theory of justice is only for liberal democracies. Justice as fairness is framed to apply to what I have called the basic structure of a modern constitutional democracy. Whether this justice as fairness can be extended for different kinds of societies existing under different historical and social conditions, or whether it can be extended to a general moral conception, are altogether separate questions. I avoid prejudging these larger questions one way or the other. So, liberties greater than difference principle, okay, is way to organize in liberal democracies only. That's one point he's making. And he says, these are only practical considerations. Okay. The aim of justice as fairness as a political conception is practical, not metaphysical or epistemological. It presents itself not as a conception of justice that is true, but one that can serve as a basis of informed and willing political arrangement. It is not justice that is generally true, but simply as a political arrangement between citizens. And who are these citizens? Free and equal. But remember, free and equal in a political sense. So this can be an agreement among humans, but only as citizens, nothing more. And then he says, to secure this agreement, we try as we can to avoid disputed philosophical as well as disputed moral and religious questions. So, what is justice philosophically? What is justice morally? We are avoiding. We do this not because these questions are unimportant or regarded with indifference, but because we think them too important to recognize that there is no way to resolve them politically. This justice as fairness deliberately stays on the surface, philosophically speaking. So, justice principles are not moral, philosophical, but only practical and political. In the sense they are limited, I would say it is equality in a cinema hall. Cinema hall owner is not taking any stand on whether humans are equal, but he is applying equality in allocation of tickets and nothing more. The conception of citizen as a free and equal persons need not involve questions of philosophical psychology or metaphysical doctrine of the nature of self. Nothing to do with the nature of self. Sandel assumed that there is some assumption about the nature of self. But Rawls is saying no political view that depends on these deep and unresolved matters can serve as a public conception of justice in a constitutional democratic state. We must apply the principle of toleration to philosophy itself. What he means is that there are many views. There are many views on what is good, many philosophies, many religions, many moral systems. Okay. But we don't go into examining them. we are not taking any stand on which is right. So our issue of justice, our principles are very limited and narrow, and in a political context. Okay. Of course, political context means how we are going to organize society. Because there is a society, and how social goods have to be distributed is the function of politics. Okay. And how these goods are to be distributed is our justice principles. Justice principles. Okay, how society needs to be organized. That organization is done by politics, but politics is only a part of the society. Society has many things. Society has religion, society has philosophy, society has politics. So politics is managing the society by saying how people should interact and should be held, should be treated in public sphere, and as citizens. Okay, so political is about organizing the society, but the organization of society is only an aspect of the society, but society is something much more. So that is what he is saying. In the context of political questions, citizens do not view the social order as a fixed natural order or as an institutional hierarchy justified by religious or aristocratic values. So, justice includes reorganization of the society, and his laws of justice are about how to reorganize. That is the point. Okay. And now, the laws are only political, saying they may regard it as simple unthinkable to view themselves apart from certain religious, philosophical and moral convictions. So people may regard themselves unthinkable apart from religious, philosophical or moral convictions, or from certain enduring attachments and loyalties. These convictions and attachments are part of what may be called their non-public identity. These convictions and attachments help to organize and give shape to a person's way of life. So, people have religions, philosophies, moral convictions, and they shape their life. But Rawls says it is non-public. So, conception of citizen as a free and equal person is not a moral ideal to govern all of life, but is rather an ideal belonging to a conception of political justice, which is to apply to the basic structure. Okay. So, this idea he calls political liberalism. He says political liberalism assumes that in a constitutional democratic state, under modern conditions, there are bound to exist conflicting and incommensurable conceptions of good. Okay. And any viable political conception of justice that is not to rely on the autocratic use of state power must recognize this fundamental social fact. So, different value systems exist, and they cannot be prioritized as superior or inferior. This cannot be said. And not saying it and leaving it to the individuals, it to individuals is to Rawls liberalism. Otherwise, if you want to insist on a particular value system, then you must use autocratic use of state power. So, the concept of Berlin's value pluralism is assumed here. Value pluralism is assumed here. Okay, and then persons can accept these conceptions of themselves as citizens and use it when discussing questions of political justice without being committed to other parts of their life to comprehensive moral ideals often associated with liberalism. For example, the ideals of autonomy and individuality. So, it is like saying Hindu has his views, Muslim has his views, Hindus have views on what is the purpose of life and what is the role of an individual, whether that individual is autonomous or not, and Muslims have their own views. But then Hindus and Muslims can come together and discuss on political questions. Without changing their views on life or life ends. Without changing their views on life and life ends, in a limited way, they can discuss how resource distribution should be handled by the government or through political institutions. Okay. And he says the absence of commitment to these ideals and indeed to any particular comprehensive ideal is essential to liberalism as a political doctrine. So, if one says that there are certain ideas, ideals, ends of life, okay, and this is being insisted on everybody, be it a Hindu or a Muslim, then Rawls would say this is illiberalism. So, any comprehensive imposition of assumptions on man, assumptions on ideals, assumptions on ends of life is liberalism. So, what Rawls wants is let Hindus remain as Hindus and Muslims remain as Muslims, and they are not going to be discriminated, okay, which is nothing but secularism. But they can come and discuss political questions. Which means a limited kind of discussion, and this limiting is a fundamental aspect of liberalism itself. Okay, and Rawls thinks that there are some who didn't see that liberalism meant this kind of limiting. Rather, they had certain ideas of goodness, ideas of ends of life, ideas of nature of man, and they wanted to impose it on others. So Rawls says, as found in Kant and J.S. Mill, these comprehensive ideals are extended too far when presented as the only appropriate foundation for a constitutional regime. So understood, liberalism becomes but another sectarian doctrine. Okay, so liberalism may say, may believe in individual autonomy, may believe in reason, may believe in freedom, liberty, equality, as a very high values. But to Rawls, every individual in a society need not believe in all these things. But it is enough if he chooses to organize political life along certain principles. So political life only, not about philosophy, spirituality, religion, no. It means Rawls thinks that politics brings only a part of man, only a part of man. So people are discussing certain common conception of political life, and not what is good for all of life. Okay, it means there is a private sphere and there is a public sphere, and Rawls is saying his laws are for public sphere only and not for private sphere. This means Rawls is going back to the original distinction made by Locke between public and private, and the state is only for public. Okay, and of course Rawls calls for public includes reforming social goods. Okay, so in the context of political, it is much more, but if you are in the context of religion, philosophy, spirituality, or what is the purpose of life, his theory of justice is, Rawls insists, it is limited, and that it is limited is what liberalism is.